My name is Grace Wade Hollis Super. I was born in New Albany, Mississippi, in the community of Wallerville. And I am the 8th of 9 children, born to John Lee Wade and Lume Jackson Wade. I was born November 2nd, 1948. I was born at home by a midwife, and I believe the midwife was Miss Siddell. And Miss Siddell was known to be a midwife for almost everyone who was born in our community. And she was from Pleasant Grove, I believe. I think her community was Pleasant Grove, and her family actually still lives there. My parents were from this area. My dad, John Lee Wade, he was born in Moleses, Tennessee, which is just outside of Jackson, Tennessee. The family moved to Gary, Indiana. His dad worked in one of the mills, I think, in Gary. And his mom died when my dad was about 12, I believe, 11 or 12. So he had 5 siblings, and his dad was a single father who could not take care of 5 children and work. So he moved the children down here to live with our uncle. We called him Uncle Jake, but his name is really Lawrence Finley. And his wife was Alberta Finley. So my dad and his brothers and sisters, he had a brother who was an infant at the time, Joe, Uncle Joe. They all came back to Mississippi, which is where my grandmother's family is from. They were Finleys. My grandmother's was a Finley. So they moved back to New Albany to live with Uncle Jake and Aunt Alberta. Later on, my grandfather came back to get the children. And my dad and my uncle Neil decided they wanted to stay in Mississippi. So Uncle Neil and Daddy stayed in Mississippi. In Cali, Uncle James, Uncle Joe, and Uncle Claude, the other 4, moved back to Gary to live with my grandfather. So Uncle Neil's family and my dad's family, our family, were the Mississippi set of the Wades, and the others were all in Gary. My mom was born here, grew up here, never moved anyplace else, loved being here. Lume Jackson Wade. Her parents, Lonnie Jackson and Ninetha Mae Ratliff Jackson, were all from here. They never lived anyplace else. My mom was an only child, and she told me that she always wanted a large family. She said because as she was growing up, she only had like one cousin who was about her age, and she always wanted to have lots of people around to play with. And she said she told her cousin, when I grow up, I'm just gonna have a lot of children, so I know they'll never be lonely. So she did. There were 9 of us, and she loved every minute of it. My oldest sister, as I said, we had 9. There are 9 of us. There are 7 girls, 2 boys. My oldest sister, Ruby. The next one is Dorothy, Emma, Shirley, JQ, Betty, Ann, me, and then my brother Dennis. And we loved being in a large family. It was wonderful. There are children who talk about not liking the fact that they had to share and they had so many people around. Well, we were just the opposite. We loved having each other around, and although 3 of them are gone, we are kind of the same now. It's like a big party every time we get together. It's just fun. My oldest sister, Ruby, was born in 1936. And my brother, who was the youngest, the baby, was born in 1950. So there was like a 14-year spread. So we were all kind of 2 years apart, about 2 years apart. And my mom was kind of like one of the kids. She just loved having folks around and cooking and laughing and playing games, and it was a lot of fun. My parents both went to school in what's called the Oak Grove, the community of Oak Grove. At the time they were there was a school, and they both attended the school in Oak Grove, and they went on to high school, but they did not graduate. It's interesting because education was extremely important to them, and they I mention to people oftentimes that they not only talk the talk, but they walk the walk as it related to valuing education. My mom got her GED. My dad not only got his GED, but actually went to college after all of us had finished college, had gone on. There are 7 of us who are college grads, and some of those have postgraduate degrees. And one of my sisters went to business college. She finished business school. And my brother joined the military. He was in the Army. But after all of us had finished all of that, my dad decided that it was his time. And he actually was really excited about being able to do what he had encouraged us to do, which was further our education. As a matter of fact, I talked about a wall. We have a wall at my mom and dad's old house. And the goal was for everybody to make the wall. The wall contains the graduation pictures, high school graduation pictures of everybody in the family. So my mom started the wall, and it started with her and my dad at the top. And then every time someone graduated from high school, she framed their picture and put it on the wall, right underneath mom and dad. And so the first row underneath mama and daddy were all of us, our high school graduation pictures. And then the next level are all of our children, and then their children. So we have 4 generations of pictures on the wall. And although mama and daddy aren't here anymore, the wall still exists, and it still exists at their house. And we would, it became kind of a game and a joke with our children and their children. Like, you gotta make the wall. I don't know what you're doing, but you gotta make the wall. So And the wall became a symbol of how important education is for our family. And it is extremely important, and we don't take it for granted. We just expected it, and we didn't expect them to do anything less than make the wall. And what was so interesting about our home is it's not a large home. It's as a matter of fact, it was not the original family home. The original home was torn down, and Mom and Daddy built another house, had another house built. And it's not a big home. It's like 3 bedrooms, you know, the typical 3-bedroom home. And we would have 50-something people for every meal, not just dinner, but when we gathered for the holidays. My sister Emma was like my mom. She loved to cook, and my sister Dorothy also, and Ann. But they loved to cook. They loved having people around. So for every meal, we'd have breakfast together, we'd have lunch together, we'd have dinner together. And then we'd just be there all day long, like 50-something people in a really, really small house, and nobody cared. Nobody minded. It was just wonderful. It was just fun. My mom died in 1988 at the age of 71. And that was quite a loss because she was like the mainstay. And my dad passed away in 2002. So he's been gone for about 20 years now, and that sounds funny. That sounds strange. My dad worked for Langford Lumber Company for most of his career. He was the supervisor at Langford Lumber, and he did that for what seemed like a lifetime. And probably maybe 10 years before he retired, he went to work for a different company that I believe was owned by Tutoring, the furniture company, or Stratford. I'm not sure what it was called at the time. But he went to work for them for probably about 10 years. But for probably 50 years, he worked for Langford Lumber Company. And my mom was primarily a stay-at-home mom. She worked a little bit. She did some what they call environmental services, but it's cleaning at one of the hotels in the motels in the area. And she worked, I think, for a couple of people for a while, but she was primarily a stay-at-home mom, which we loved. We attended elementary school in a church building, Oak Grove Baptist Church, which is the Oak Grove community within the Wallerville area. The school, I mentioned earlier that my mom and dad had gone to school in Oak Grove. The school burned at some point in time prior to my starting school, actually. The school burned, and I think for a brief period, the children from my community attended school in Pleasant Grove. But then they changed that, and they came back to our community, but we attended school in the church building because they never rebuilt the school. And it was interesting because the church building was not that large. So, but all of the classes from what they call primer and pre-primer all the way through 8th grade All of it was in the same room, same church building. Each grade had its own section, and while the teachers were teaching, we had two teachers, while the teachers were teaching their classes, you had to sit in your section and be quiet. But in doing so, I think that was a tremendous advantage for us, because we had to be quiet and we listened. So we heard what was being taught in all the other grades. So by the time we got to that grade, we actually were familiar with the material. So it made it a lot easier for us to comprehend what was going on. And I really do believe that that contributed tremendously to our learning. Our teacher, my teacher, for I think the entire time I was in elementary school, was actually my aunt. And it was Augusta Word. It was Augusta's mom, Miss Word, A. Maddie, was our teacher, my teacher. And she would teach the classes, but she would have the older children do what you just described as peer tutoring for the younger grades, but that did not, they were not perceived to be our teachers, but they would tutor us and make sure that we stayed quiet while she taught the other classes, but she also made sure she actually did the teaching. She actually taught us, so. But we did have peer tutoring. I could not figure out why we had what they called at the time, pre-primer, primer, and then first grade. And I just remember the Jack running and the ball and Jack and Jill and but Spot was always the dog. But we had basic material. We had geography. We had the sciences, but we never, of course, had any labs. No lab work at all. And the interesting thing for us is, not even in high school did we have a functional lab. We had, and we certainly didn't have it in elementary school because we were in the church building, but we never had functional labs, which was a distinct disadvantage for me when I got to college, but it worked out. But we had the typical books: history, geography, math, English, and there was such an emphasis on math and English. I oftentimes talk to young people that we've tutored. My husband and I were tutors at our church and in our community. And I would use a phrase like diagram a sentence, and the children would look at me and say, "What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Diagram a sentence?" Well, we had to do that. I don't know if you ever had that, but we had to diagram a sentence showing pictorially all the parts of a sentence. But anyway, they don't do anything like that these days. But there was such emphasis on English and math. We learned the sciences, we learned social studies, and we had different levels of social study and humanities, but the big emphasis was on math and English, and we got it. We got it. There was a chalkboard. I think it was like a rolling kind of chalkboard. It was not a permanent board, because we used the church for church purposes outside of school hours. So the church was a functional operating church, and we had one little area where they stored the school material. We had a little room off to the side in the church. And they kept the chalkboards and all of the globes and all of the school material in the little storage room off to one side of the church. But the church was a fully functional church, so we didn't have any permanent chalkboards or any of the school-related material. Nothing was permanent in the room. We would sit on the pew, and we would hold our books on our lap and work on our laps. And we had, well, for me, I had known nothing different. I had never had any different experience other than working with my material on my lap and sitting on a church pew. So when the schools consolidated and we moved to the school in New Albany, via Ford at the time, Union County Training School, it was such a different experience because we did have desks. And that was the first time I had a desk. It was different. But we thought nothing strange about holding your book in your lap and having to write on your lap. That was it. And there were times we sat on the floor, but typically not. Penmanship was probably third on the list. I mentioned math, English, and penmanship. And you did not leave a grade until you had mastered those basics. You know, it was fine to know what the continents were, you know, to know geography. That was good. But if you did not write clearly, if you did not speak correct English and speak distinctly, and if you did not know your timetables, and if you didn't know math, you did not leave that grade. You did not, and they did not promote us. There was no such thing as social promotion, which I understand exists to some extent today. But there was no social promotion. You earned it. When you got promoted to another grade, you had earned it. But I will say, there was something that I don't think they do today, which was you could skip a grade. If you could master all of the required learning for a particular grade level, then they would let you skip to the next level. So I had friends and cousins who skipped a grade. And I had a couple of cousins a couple of us were offered the opportunity, but wouldn't take it. My mom and dad were very concerned that we do everything that was required, everything. So when it was offered that we could skip a grade, they opted not to have us do that because they wanted to make sure that we knew what was required for that particular grade. So we never skipped a grade, and but a lot of the material came pretty easily to us, but it was primarily because we had heard it. The 7th grade year, they made the decision to consolidate the schools. So all of what they call the county schools closed and were consolidated into the city school, which was Union County Training School, which is via Ford. So when I was 8th grade was my first year, I believe it was, at here in the city. And that was a big deal, you know, because now we rode buses, and I thought that was great. But it was 8th grade when we started school here. So from pre-prim through 7th grade, I was at Oak Grove. When we consolidated the schools into one school, in one Union County school, for the Black Americans, we were all consolidated, teachers and students. So yes, the teachers who were teaching in the county schools actually moved into the city school system. I remember my sisters talking about someone named Butler, and I believe he was from Red Hill, but he was a bus driver, and I thought that was so cool because he was young. He was a student himself, but he was the bus driver. My husband was a bus driver from the time he was 14 in South Carolina. And no adults on the bus. He was in charge. He was 14 years old and in charge of driving and maintaining order on the bus. I couldn't believe that, but it was the same situation here. I don't know, I can't remember how old the students were, but I do remember that they were students driving the buses. I think when I started pre-primer, I was 4. I believe I was 4. And then I went to primer and I was 5. So it probably is equivalent to like preschool and kindergarten now, but they did call it primer and pre-primer, and we had books specifically designed for that. But I thought, this is crazy. How much school are we supposed to have? I thought it was funny. When I first came to BF Ford, Union County Training School, my first impression was, oh my God, this is so big, I'll never find my way around. So it was intimidating. Just the thought of the size of the building after attending a one-room school, church school. I thought, oh my God, this is so huge. And this was before they put on the new edition, or I think they were in the process at the time. But I thought, this is so huge, I'll never find my way around, I'm going to be lost every day, and no one's going to like me, you know, I'm going to meet all these new city kids who are sophisticated and know what they're doing and know what's going on, and here I am, I don't know where I'm going to be, I don't know how to find my way around. So it was very intimidating. But I did have an advantage. I knew Hazel. And Hazel had grown up in that school, and I had come to spend the night with Hazel a couple of times, several times before we actually consolidated. And I had walked up to the building with her a couple of times. So that gave me a bit of an advantage, but it was still intimidating. And I thought, am I going to know the material? Is it going to be anything different? And primarily, am I going to be liked? You know, that was very important. Am I going to be liked? And are the kids going to be mean and rude, or do I fit in? You know, that was pretty important. When the schools were consolidated, the other advantage I had was that my sisters and my brother were there. And they kind of told me not to worry. But then, you know, I had a couple who teased me and said, you're going to get lost every day, you know. So, but of course, I'm the 8th of 9 children. So before me, there were 6 others who had been through that school. So that gave me a little confidence that I can do this and it's okay, you know. And I'm trying to remember if my sister Ann, I think Ann kind of walked me around like the first day or so after we got there. And then I was with Hazel when we changed classes because we were in the same class. So she kind of made sure I was comfortable. And but my sister Betty, my brother Jay, my sister Ann were there at the time I came to the school. I think Betty and Jay were seniors, and Ann was probably a sophomore at the time. And we were in different areas, but they made me comfortable that it was going to be fine. When we were growing up, one of the most exciting days of the week was the peddler man. And he came typically once a week. I think at one point he came twice a week, but pretty much it was once a week. And we called him the peddler man. He had a truck. And I loved the peddler man. I don't know how he decided how to stock his truck, but it was like a traveling grocery store. And he would sell everything from basic food staples like flour and sugar and things like that to, of course, the treats for kids, you know, suckers and the candies and moon pies. And I think he had a case for drinks like Cokes and that kind of thing. But he also would sell things like, I don't know if you've ever heard of like the flour sack material. He would sell like flour in the flour sack material. So it's almost like if you had a new dress coming, you knew that your mom was going to buy a lot of flour that month because she was going to get the material and use the material from the flour sacks to make clothes and to make things. But he actually sold material also from the peddler truck. But he sold a little bit of everything. And he had it open like a door on the side, and you would go up to the side door. He had his truck and then the back part of it, the trailer part, and it wasn't very big, but the trailer part was where he had all of his goods. And it had a side door, and you would go up to the side door to order whatever you wanted from the peddler man. I love the peddler man. From time to time, he will let you come in. I do remember going in one time because that's when he had his goods, and he had a little aisle, but typically you didn't go in. But I did go in for some reason. I don't know if my mom was picking some material or something, but anyway, he did allow you to come in. He allowed us to come in. And I thought, oh my gosh, where did he get all this stuff? It was an interesting concept, but it worked. I love the peddler man. So he only came one day a week, and I think he did it by community. Like our communities were, I think our day was Tuesday. For some reason that stands out to me, But I remember we would wait expectantly for the peddler man's truck. And I remember somebody would always, there was always someone outside, and you'd hear them yelling, "The peddler man is coming, the peddler man is coming." So it might have been just one person who went community to community. That's it. I always kind of thought it was more than one, though, but I'm not sure. I was probably about 3 or 4 years old when I became really conscious of the peddler man coming. And probably through age, well, most of my life. And I don't remember when the peddler man stopped coming. The peddler man was a very, very creative idea because most people did not have cars. Most people, we didn't have stores in the area. So most people had no way of getting their goods unless they had someone who would do it for them, or and like I said, most people in the community did not have vehicles. So the peddler man was an essential part of our lives at that time. And the older people especially, who did not drive, who did not typically go beyond the borders of their own community, relied heavily on the peddler man. And what I was trying to remember is if the peddler man gave credit, and I don't think he did. I think he was a cash-only business. If you didn't have cash, you didn't get it. But it was an essential part of the community. We had 4-H club. That was one of the things that I loved most. We would have oratory, speaking contests, and I won the 4-H club speakers award locally. And I remember I ended up going to Mississippi State and competing, all part of 4-H club. And Miss Adams, I think, was her name. But I remember she encouraged me. She was one of my encouragers. And I remember competing locally. And then I remember going to the regional, and then I went to the state, and I did well. And I remember coming home and being interviewed by the radio station, and I thought that was really that was different. That was unique. But 4-H club was one of my favorites. I tried playing basketball. We didn't have formal competitive team, but we had a local school team. So I went out for basketball. I was not very good, but I had a cousin, Carlita, who was very good, and she. I think because she and some of our other friends were playing, and because I was tall and skinny at the time, everybody encouraged me to come out to try out for it. So I did. And I played, but I was not good. I was not good. But anyway, I did participate in that. I was a part of a cheer team at one time, and we had a couple of clubs through like home economics. Hazel and I had a deal though. Hazel was very good at everything related to home economics, and especially sewing. I could barely make an apron, and it was a challenge to do that. And then when it came to making a suit with a wool suit with a lining, we had to do that. That was our project 1 year. And it was, a full suit, jacket, skirt, the whole bit with a collar, buttons. You had to do the buttons, holes, and the buttons and the lapels, and then you had to put the lining in it. And I was horrible at that. Hazel was excellent. She was great. My cousin Carlita was good. So I had a lot of help, and I was just thankful that people liked me enough to help me get through that class. It was horrible. But we did not have organized sports except basketball, men's basketball, by the time I was in school, high school. But we had something called May Day. And May Day had all of these games and events, and my race was the potato race. I was very good at the potato race. That was about the extent of my athletic ability. But it was fun. I could run. I was very coordinated, but I wasn't very fast. So I graduated in '66. And our schools were still segregated at the time. We had not integrated the schools, and the activities were not integrated. So I believe I remember 4-H parades, but it was the white 4-H club, not the black 4-H club. But we did participate. I mentioned the oratorical challenges. Those were, we competed within the black schools first, but then the winners competed against the white school, and then when we went to regional and state, it was integrated. But most of the things like here were still very segregated. I never got a Mississippi driver's license. Now mind you, this was in 1960, I was in college at the time. So it was probably 67 or 68. It was probably 68, I think. I came home for the summer, and my mom took me to try for my driver's license. So I was so excited. I think it was 68. And I passed my driver's test with flying colors. I had passed the written test with flying colors. And I came back in, and my mom said, "I'll wait for you in the car." So I said, okay. I was at the desk and having the papers filled out for my license and everything. And the examiner, I don't know who he was, and I wouldn't mention his name if I knew, asked me questions. And I said, I would say yes, no. And all of a sudden, he hit the desk and he said, "Look here, Missy." He said, "I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're up there in the north in school with those white people. Down here, you say yes, sir, and no, sir, when a white man asks you a question." And I sat there like this. And he went on to give me this huge lecture about just because I was going to school with white people, he hoped that I didn't think that that made me better than, and he used the word, any other in this county. And he said, so I was in shock. So he finally said, "Do you understand what I'm telling you, girlie?" And I looked at him and I said, "Yes, I do." He took my papers. He tore them up in front of me. He threw them in the air on the floor and said, "Until you learn how a is supposed to talk to a white man, you will not get a license in Mississippi." So he asked me, he says, "Do you understand what I'm telling you?" So I got up and I said, "Yes, I do, as a matter of fact." And I got up and I walked out. And when I got out, my mom said, "Did you get your license? Let me see." And I said, "No, ma'am, I did not." And she said, "Why? What happened?" So I told her. I told her what happened. She went back into the office. She said, "You stay here 1 minute." She went back into the office. I have no clue what she did, what she said. She came and got back in the car and she said, "Do you want a license?" I said, "No, ma'am." So we went home. By the time we got home, my daddy had come home from his job. And he said, "What did you all do?" And my mother said, he asked me, "What did you do?" And my mother said she did nothing wrong. Someone had called his boss before we got back to my house. Someone had called his boss had come and gotten him off the job. He came to the house to say, "What did you do?" So I never got a Mississippi license. And my first driver's license was Michigan. My cousin and my sister and I, without knowing it, were credited for integrating the theater here. We were hot one night. We were eating ice cream and we were really hot. It was a summer night. I was home from school. All of us were home from school. And at that time, the movie theater was still segregated. White sat downstairs, black sat upstairs. And I don't know if you know that we had to go around the side of the building, go up the steps to get to the balcony. And this night, we decided we wanted to see a movie. It was really hot night, and we said, "Let's just go to a movie, sit down, cool it down." So we went to the theater, and we bought our tickets at the counter downstairs, as always. And we got our tickets, and the one of us said, "I don't feel like walking up those steps tonight." And we said, "Let's not. We'll just go in down here." So we did. And it was like probably 68, 69, somewhere around there. And we just went in. Well, the person on the counter said, "You can't go in there, you can't go in there." And we said, "Why? Aren't they showing the same movie down here?" And he says, "Yeah, but you can't go in there. That's not for you. You have to go around the side." And we said, "Oh, we're fine here." So we walked in and we sat down and they started to play the movie. And all of a sudden the movie shut off. And there was an announcement that everybody could come back and get their money or get a rain check. And I was like, "Oh, man." So everybody left. We left. And we just assumed the film broke or something. Well, the next day we all went back to school. I went to Massachusetts and sister went to Tennessee and my cousin went to Wisconsin, I think. Anyway, I got a phone call at school from my mom, again asking me, "What did you do while you were here?" And I said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Nothing." She said, we have been contacted by the NAACP, we've been contacted by the local newspaper that, and it was in the newspaper or something, that there was a sit-in at the theater and they integrated the movie theater. You know, there was a sit-in, and I thought, no, we just didn't feel like walking up the steps. So after that, they decided they didn't want any trouble, so they integrated the theater. So it was that simple, you know, and nobody, no issue, but no one had done it. So we just did it, so we're credited with integrating the movie theater. We just wanted a seat. B.F. Ford was just a wonderful, wonderful training ground, preparation ground for me. One of the things I remember most about B.F. Ford in Oak Grove, my elementary school, is how much I felt like people cared about me. And I oftentimes now think back on how many people contributed to my well-being, because they cared, and it was not fake. It was genuine. They cared about me, and they helped shape me. It helped me understand. I didn't understand it at the time, but I think it was more than just a school. It was a life, and it taught me life lessons. But it gave me what I needed to become who I am, and it helped me define who I am and be who I am, because they gave me a degree of freedom, but also a lot of discipline and a lot of direction. And it was because people cared. People cared about you at that school. But anyway, I came out of Ford. I was valedictorian, but not because of just me. You know, certainly my parents had given me certain capabilities to be able to do things, and that helped. But I had caring, giving people who were at Ford and along the way who helped me be what I could be. While I was there, and I want to say it was Miss Gibson and Mr. Estes and Miss Ford helped me get into summer programs. I went to Jackson State after my 8th grade year, and every year subsequent to that, after that, every summer I was in kind of an academic, advanced academics program. I went to Knoxville College for 2 summers, 3 summers actually. And through that program, Summer Study Skills program, I met Sam Johnson was the person who ran that program, and Dr. McCarthy, Charlie McCarthy, was the dean at Yale University. I met them through those programs. So when I graduated from high school, it was my intent to go to Jackson State University. Well, Dr. McCarthy said, no, let's not do that, you know. And Mr. Johnson said, we'd like you to consider some schools in the East, on the East Coast and in the North. I finally convince my dad that I could still be a good girl even if I went to far away, and I could do this, you know, I would be okay. My mom was fine with it, but my dad wasn't totally convinced. But we finally got his approval and his agreement. So I ended up going to Yale University in New Haven, Connecticut. And I went to Mount Holyoke College in South Hadley, Massachusetts. And those were wonderful, wonderful experiences. Once I left college, and college was wonderful. And it was an indication to me that when people care about you and when people make an investment in you, you should try your best to give them returns on their investment. And people invested in me. I never paid 1 cent for any of my education, not 1 penny. As a matter of fact, not only did I not pay anything, I had the Board of National Missions, the Women's Division of the Board of National Missions for the Presbyterian Church, actually gave me a grant beyond my tuition, room, and board that gave me money. They sent me money every month to help with my personal expenses and that kind of thing. So, and I just had a lot of people who invested in me, and I didn't want to let them down. So I did my best, I tried my best, and I did. I graduated, I went on to, I worked in Michigan. I moved to Michigan after school. I worked at Shaw College. I taught at Shaw College for a bit. And after Shaw College, I worked for a design group in Detroit. We helped design the Art Center area of Detroit, which was in what they call the Cascorda Art Center area. And I worked for them, and then I worked for an anti-poverty program for Wayne County. And then I went to work for Ford. Oh, no, I went to work for Detroit Institute of Technology. I was Community and Public Relations Director for Detroit Institute of Technology for a while. And then I went to work for Ford. And I worked for Ford for over 25 years. And when I retired, I was managing their business operations office for Ford Motor Land Development. And so I've had a wonderful career, wonderful life. A lot of people have cared about me, so now I'm trying to pay it forward. I do whatever I can do to help somebody. My major in college was psychology and sociology. Loved it, loved sociology. Tolerated psychology, but I actually liked it. But my major, I had a dual psychology, sociology major. I have worked with people all my life, both on the job and off the job. I mentioned early on about spiritual gift. One of my spiritual gifts is the gift of exhortation, which means spiritual gift of exhortation. Literally, exhortation means to come alongside of, to lift up, to encourage. And that's one of my spiritual gifts. I love counseling. I love talking and helping people. I didn't realize it at the time. I first started doing it. It felt burdensome because it's like, I don't know if I want to be bothered with this. But then I realized every time I would do something that might help somebody else a little bit, it just made me feel better and better and better. So I realized that it's one of the things that I'm supposed to do. So I counsel people, I talk to people, I love doing it. I am married. I'm married to a wonderful, wonderful man named James Super. He is my soulmate. He's my second husband. My first husband, Carl Hollis, passed away in 1993. When Carl and I were married in 1975. Is that right? Yeah, 1975. And in 1981, we had a son whose name is Justin. He's one of my best friends, and I'm thankful that I've lived long enough that I can say that. He and I are in fact best friends and spiritual comrades. Yeah, he's just a good young man. But Justin is my only biological child, but I've been blessed because Carl had 3 sons and a daughter, and his 3 sons are deceased, his daughter, but I was allowed to have the opportunity to be a mother to them part-time. You know, their mom was still alive, so they were in our lives. My daughter is still in my life, in her family. She lives in Muskegon, Michigan. My son, Justin, lives now in Wilmington, North Carolina, which is only about 45 miles from us. We were so blessed to have them move from Michigan to North Carolina in 2018. And his wife is director. She's an HR benefits director for Thermo Fisher. And they have 2 wonderful children named Ainsley and Jameson, my heart. But anyway, they live in Wilmington, North Carolina now, and I love every minute because Grandma could do sleepovers. And Justin's dad, Carl, died in 1993. I actually knew my current husband. I knew him from work. His wife passed probably 2 weeks after my husband passed away. And God saw fit to allow us to come into each other's lives. And he has 2 children, a daughter, Kimberly, and James Jr. And Kimberly had 2 lovely young ladies named Daly and Caden. Also my heart. Our daughter Kimberly passed away in 2019 very suddenly. She had an aneurysm. Our son Jim lives in Indianapolis. He's a director for a logistics company called Geodis. And he's married to Walanda, and they have 3 children. Well, he has Naya, graduated from Tennessee State this past year, thank the Lord, and Sydney and James the third. And Naya's in Nashville still. and Sydney and Gio and Wallanda and Jim are in Indianapolis. And they are all just my heart's delight, and just brilliant young people. I am so proud of them, and the boys and my husband would be extremely disappointed if I didn't say all three of them are Morehouse men. So for you all, Morehouse is the school. Kimberly was a Spelman graduate. But we are just a loving, wonderful family. They have made us proud. They finished college and gone on to get grad degrees, and it's just been just a wonderful, fulfilling family who made us proud. And we are just thankful that all of them are healthy and Christians, and they love God, and it's just wonderful. So we feel blessed, mighty blessed. I do want to mention one thing about our school. It almost sounds like bragging, but it's not bragging. It's a testimony to what the school did and who the school was. When we were 10th grade, I believe it is, Carolyn Wade, and I don't know if anyone's mentioned Carolyn's name. Carolyn was salutatorian when I was valedictorian in school. Carolyn and I were always pretty much on par as it related to academics. And we both attended the summer study skills programs together. But anyway, and Carolyn's mom was Miss Geneva Wade. She was one of the teachers at the school. But Carolyn and I, and we are not related, as we might have been distantly related, but both of us were Wades. But Carolyn and I, when we were 9th grade, I believe, 8th grade, was the first time that they had ever done testing, national testing at the black school here. And Carolyn and I both scored in the upper 5% national. And that was part of what got us into the other summer programs that we were in. But when we were 10th grade, we had people come to the school from New York. And the reason they came was because of our test scores on the national test. It was the NEDTC, the National Education Development Testing Corporation, or something like that. And the reason they came to our school was because they had us take the national test multiple times. And both times Carolyn and I scored like in the upper 3 to 5% nationally. And it was a little bitty school in New Albany, Mississippi, a place no one had ever heard of. So I remember there were 3 people who came from that group. Didn't think much of it at the time. But I remember Miss Ford called us to the office, Miss Inez, called us to the office and said, there are some people here who want to meet you guys. So we went to the office, and the people there wanted to interview us. And they had interviewed Miss Ford, we found out later. And the reason was they did not believe that we had scored what we scored. They thought maybe there was some cheating or something. Because our school was so small, it was a black school, an all-black school. And like I said, we didn't even have like an equipped lab. We typically had hand-me-down books and the whole bit. So there was just some question about how could this possibly be? And it's more than being a testament to us. It's a testament to the school, what that school did and how they did it. They taught us. They taught us. And they taught us well. And they taught us very thoroughly. And we had no clue that nationally they had taught us in a way that helped us be competitive with children who've had everything. But I just wanted to say those teachers taught us, and they taught us well. And it was, I really appreciate that. I really appreciate that. We had some of the best teachers ever. And I just wanted to say that. They started testing us in 8th grade. I had been in Oak Grove from pre-prima to 7th through 7th grade. They started testing us in 8th grade. I remember, because it was like one lady, it was a black lady, a white man, and a black man. And I remember them asking, I remember the lady saying, we had to come because we wanted to meet you. We wanted to see who from this kind of school could have the score that you had. We didn't, it didn't mean anything to us because we just took a test. That was it. We just took a test. And I remember them asking, they asked about the environment in which we were tested. They asked, did we have pre-knowledge of the testing? They asked, would we be willing to take the test again? Of course, we said, sure, no problem. And they asked if they started asking about our training. Had we been coached, like before we were tested? Of course, we had not. We had never taken the test before. Never been tested nationally at all. It was just tests where you filled in the little boxes, the little blanks. And then they said they wanted to see our school, asked if we would show them around the school. And they asked what classes we had, like especially in math, because apparently we had scored high in math and English. I don't know. But they asked what methods were used to teach us, but it was basically just those kinds of questions. We showed them around. I think they actually, I'm trying to remember, I think they actually had us do a mini questionnaire or something. I think to see, in hindsight, I think it was to see if we really did know what we knew. But, and we showed them around the school. They talked to a couple of the teachers. And I don't know. I think that's all I remember. And then they left. And I think we were tested again within that week or something. So, and I think it was monitored this time, but I can't remember. But anyway, it was interesting. But the school was, both Oak Grove and BF Ford have been just a gift to my life. Carolyn went on to become Dr. Rollins. And she worked at a couple of universities. She was in Georgia. She comes back periodically.
Okay.
I don't know how recent. She was here. Someone told me she was here not long ago. We actually kept in touch for years, and I would see her in Michigan from time to time because there were a couple of things she was doing that brought her to Michigan for her job. She had something. She was working on some project. I remember the last time that had to do with um, closed head injuries or something like that. But she's Dr. Rollins,